Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving deep into one of the most fascinating concepts in sci-fi literature and theory, humans as deathworlders, and the absolute terror that spreads through an advanced alien civilization when they discover exactly what that means. If you're new here, I explore the most compelling sci-fi concepts that make us reconsider our place in the cosmos, from theoretical xenobiology to the philosophical implications of first contact scenario. Before we journey into this cosmic horror story from an alien perspective, take a second to obliterate that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. It genuinely helps the algorithm recognize this content, and you'll join our community of sci-fi enthusiasts who never miss an upload. Also, stick around until the end because I've got a thought experiment that I'm dying to see your responses to in the comments. Now, let's talk deathworlders. For those unfamiliar with the concept, it's a classification system hypothesized in sci-fi where planets are rated based on how hostile they are to life. Earth, our home, would likely be classified as an extreme death world by galactic standards. Why? Consider what we take for granted. Crushing gravity at 9.8 m/s2, atmospheric pressure of 14.7 pounds per square inch, temperature swings from -50 DEGC to +50 DEGC depending on location, corrosive oxygen in our atmosphere, thousands of predatory species, microscopic organisms that can kill us, tectonic activity, extreme weather events, and radiation from our sun that can literally damage our DNA. And yet, here we are, not just surviving, but thriving, building civilizations, creating art, exploring space. To an alien species that evolved on a more forgiving world, we wouldn't just be unusual, we'd be terrifying. Today's narrative focuses on the Ziraxian Hegemony, a species that has dominated their sector of the galaxy for over 12,000 years. They are about to discover that the primitive bipedal species they've been casually observing is something far more nightmarish than they could have possibly imagined. The observation platform, Silent Vigil, hung in the darkness beyond Mars, its adaptive camouflage rendering it virtually invisible to Earth's primitive detection systems. Inside, Senior Observer Vextral stood before the holographic display, his iridescent scales shifting from deep blue to purple as he studied the latest data from the planet below. "Fascinating creatures," he murmured, manipulating the display to zoom in on a human military exercise taking place in a region the natives called Siberia. Soldiers trudged through snow, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air as they carried heavy equipment across the frozen landscape. "I don't understand why you find them so interesting," said Junior Observer Zilnar, her scales a dismissive yellow-green. "They're primitive, violent, and hopelessly divided. They can barely agree on planetary governance, let alone achieve anything significant in space." Vextral's head crest expanded slightly, the Ziraxian equivalent of raised eyebrows. "And yet, look at their progress. 200 of their years ago, they were traveling by animal-drawn vehicles. Now they have rudimentary spacecraft and global communication networks. Their rate of technological advancement is unusual. A statistical anomaly," Zilnar dismissed. "Nothing more." "Perhaps," Vextral conceded, but his tone suggested otherwise. He manipulated the display again, bringing up biological data. "Their physical capabilities are remarkable as well. Their endurance in particular exceeds most known species, a product of their high-gravity environment," Zilnar said with a shrug of her upper shoulders. "Nothing we haven't seen before." Beckstrom zoomed in on footage of a human athletic competition, a marathon through a desert environment. "They call this recreation," he noted, "running until exhaustion in conditions that would kill most sentient species. For entertainment." Before Zilnar could respond, the communication array chimed. A holographic projection of High Commander Krelvor materialized in the center of the observation deck, his scales the deep crimson of authority. "Senior Observer Vextral," the commander's voice resonated through the chamber. The High Council has reviewed your reports on the Earth species. They have authorized first contact. Vextrom's scales shifted to pale blue, surprise. First contact? With respect, High Commander, they've barely achieved spaceflight. The non-interference protocols have been waived. Kelvor interrupted. The resource surveys of their system are promising. Additionally, their physical capabilities and aggressive tendencies suggest they could be valuable additions to our military forces against the Dorlathi expansion. And they would be recruited as soldiers. Vextral asked, his tone carefully neutral. Have their appropriate technological uplift and cultural integration, yes. Krelvor's projection shifted slightly. The diplomatic cruiser Eternal Vigilance will arrive within 3 of their days. You will join the contact team, given your expertise on their species. As you command, Vextra responded with a formal bow. As the projection faded, Zilna turned to her superior, her scales now a curious purple. This is unexpected. We've been observing them for decades without interference. Politics, Vextral said simply. The Dorlathi conflict is escalating. The hegemony needs advantages. He turned back to the display, watching the humans go about their lives, blissfully unaware that their world was about to change forever. I only hope we're not making a terrible mistake. The diplomatic cruiser Eternal Vigilance was a masterpiece of Ziraxian engineering, nearly 2 kilometers long, its hull composed of living metal that could repair itself, powered by a quantum singularity drive that bent the fabric of space-time. It was designed to impress, to awe, to demonstrate the unquestionable technological superiority of the Ziraxian hegemony. In the ship's strategic planning chamber, Commander Vextral, newly promoted from his observer role, stood before the assembled diplomatic and military team. His scales had settled into the professional deep blue of formal presentation. Earth is a Class 9 gravity world with a nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere, he explained, as a holographic representation of the planet rotated above the central table. The dominant species, humans, are carbon-based bipeds with remarkable physical resilience and adaptability. Ambassador Threlvor, the hegemony's most experienced diplomat, studied the rotating image with his 3 primary eyes. Their technological level? Pre-FTL, Vextral replied. They have achieved limited spaceflight within their own system, global communication networks, and have recently developed rudimentary artificial intelligence. Their energy production still relies primarily on fossil fuels and nuclear fission, though they're beginning to harness solar and wind power more efficiently. Primitive, as expected, noted military strategist Stravkor, who scales the aggressive red-orange of tactical assessment. What of their military capabilities? Vextrom hesitated. Complex. They remain divided into nation-states, each with their own military forces. Their most advanced weapons include thermonuclear devices, kinetic orbital platforms, and experimental directed energy weapons. However, he emphasized, their true strength lies not in their technology, but in their adaptability and tenacity. Explain, Travkor demanded. Humans have evolved on a world that has tried to kill them in countless ways, Vextral said. Their history is a continuous struggle against their environment, predators, diseases, and each other. This has shaped them into natural survivors. They don't surrender easily. Ambassador Threlvor waved a dismissive hand. Many species have evolved in challenging environments. Once they understand our technological superiority, they will recognize the benefits of hegemony integration. That is respect, Ambassador, Vextral countered. I've studied them for decades. Their psychological profile is unusual. They respond to displays of force not with submission, but with defiance. Well, the more reason to ensure our first impression is overwhelming, Travkor said. We must leave no doubt as to the outcome should they resist. Vextral's scales shifted to the pale yellow of concern. I recommend a more measured approach. A single ship, minimal display of military capability. Your concern is noted, Commander. interrupted Captain Zurval, the vessel's commanding officer. But the High Council has approved the standard first contact protocol. We will decloak over one of their major population centers, demonstrate our technological superiority, and open communications from a position of strength. Bextral's head crest flattened in resignation. Which population center? The most prominent city-state, Captain Zoval replied. A place called New York. As the meeting concluded, Zilnar, now serving as Vextral's assistant, approached her commander. "You disagree with the approach?" she observed. "I've spent too long watching humans to underestimate them," Vextral replied quietly. "They may be technologically inferior, but they are not to be trifled with. They're just another pre-FTL species," Zilnar said. "The protocol has worked dozens of times before." Vextral's gaze remained on the holographic Earth, slowly rotating above the table. "Perhaps, but something tells me humans will not follow the expected script. The eternal vigilance emerged from FTL at the edge of Earth's solar system, its quantum drives leaving a brief distortion in space-time that Earth's primitive sensors registered as an anomalous gravitational wave. As the massive ship accelerated toward the third planet, Captain Zorval ordered a full scan of the system. "Multiple artificial satellites detected," reported the sensor officer. "Primitive communication networks, rudimentary defense systems, and—" "Interesting. Report," Zorval commanded. "Their military forces are mobilizing. Commander Vextral, standing at his assigned position on the bridge, felt his scale shift involuntarily to the pale yellow of concern. They shouldn't have that capability. "Evidently they do," Captain Zolval replied dismissively. "It changes nothing. Proceed as planned." The massive ship decelerated as it approached Earth, taking position directly over the sprawling metropolis of New York City. Its cloaking field disengaged, revealing the full majesty of Ziraxian engineering, a vessel that dwarfed anything humans had ever constructed, its living metal hull shimmering with iridescent patterns of light. On the bridge, the sensor officer's voice rose with alarm. "Captain, we're detecting multiple launches from the surface, primitive missiles, but in significant numbers." "Raise shields," Zorbel ordered calmly. "Let them exhaust their arsenal. It will demonstrate the futility of resistance." The first wave of missiles detonated against the ship's energy shields, creating spectacular explosions that did nothing to harm the vessel. On the planet below, panic spread through the city as millions of humans witnessed the massive alien ship hovering above them, seemingly impervious to their most powerful weapons. "Open communications," ordered Ambassador Threlvor. "Standard first contact message, all frequencies translated into their dominant languages." The communication officer complied, broadcasting the carefully crafted message that had been used dozens of times before. "People of Earth, we are representatives of the Ziraxian Hegemony, a peaceful coalition of advanced civilizations. We come to offer you the benefits of our knowledge and protection. Cease your hostile actions and prepare to receive our diplomatic delegation." The response came almost immediately, not from a single world government, but from dozens of different human nations, all demanding the same thing: the immediate withdrawal of the alien vessel from Earth's atmosphere. "They're not following protocol," Zilnar observed, her scales shifting to a confused blue-green. "As I predicted," Vextral said quietly. Ambassador Threlvor seemed unconcerned. "A typical response from a pre-unification species. They require a demonstration of our benevolent intentions." He turned to Captain Zerval. "The standard display, if you please." Zorval nodded. "Target the uninhabited island at coordinates 24.7 DEG north, 78 DE west. Minimal yield energy projection." The weapons officer programmed the coordinates. "Target acquired. Energy projection ready." "Fire," Zolvel commanded. A beam of concentrated energy lanced from the underside of the Eternal Vigilance, striking the small, uninhabited island in the Atlantic Ocean. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The island simply ceased to exist, vaporized into a cloud of superheated steam and debris. "Demonstration complete," reported a weapons officer. "Effect as expected." "Excellent," Ambassador Threlvor said. "Now they will understand." "Captain," the sensor officer interrupted, his scales flashing alarming red. "Multiple launches detected. Thousands of missiles from submarines, land-based silos, and aircraft. Different design from the previous wave." Beckstrom moved quickly to the sensor display. "Nuclear warheads," he reported grimly. "They're deploying their strategic arsenal." Captain Zorval remained unperturbed. "Our shields can withstand primitive nuclear weapons. Let them exhaust themselves." "There's more." Vextrol continued studying the data. "Some of these missiles, they're not following ballistic trajectories, they're maneuvering." "Impossible," Dravgor scoffed. "Pre-FTL species don't have guided nuclear missiles." "His humans do," Vextrol replied, his scales now the deep red of urgent warning. "And they're deploying something else. Energy signatures I don't recognize." The first wave of nuclear missiles detonated against the ship's shields, creating blinding flashes of light and radiation. As expected, the shields held. But among the conventional nuclear warheads were several experimental weapons, EMP devices designed to disrupt electronic systems, and something the humans called quantum field disruptors, theoretical weapons they had been developing based on their limited understanding of quantum mechanics. By sheer coincidence, these experimental weapons resonated with the Ziraxian shield frequency. "Shield integrity at 82% and falling," reported the defense officer, his scales now pulsing with alarm. "Unknown energy interactions, destabilizing the harmonic matrix." "Impossible," Captain Zorval exclaimed. "Recalibrate the shields." "Trying, Captain, but the attack pattern is unpredictable. They're not following any known strategy." Commander Vextrol moved to the tactical display. "They're adapting in real time," he observed. "Look at the attack pattern. Each wave is targeting where our shields showed weakness during the previous assault." "How could they possibly analyze our technology so quickly?" Zilnar asked, her scales now the pale blue of shock. "Because they're deathworlders," Vextrol replied grimly. "Adaptation isn't just their strategy, it's in their DNA." Malikant taught. "Shield integrity at 64% and falling," reported the defense officer. "We're detecting more launches from the surface, and their orbital platforms are repositioning." Captain Zorval's scales had shifted to the deep orange of controlled anger. "This is unprecedented. No pre-FTL species has ever damaged a hegemony vessel." "We should withdraw," Commander Vextrol suggested. "Regroup and reassess." "Retreat? Before primitives?" Military strategist Dravker's scales flushed crimson with outrage. "Unthinkable. We should respond with overwhelming force. One full-power shot at their largest military installation would end this resistance, and potentially trigger a full-scale war with a species we clearly don't understand," Vextrol countered. "Captain, I strongly recommend withdrawal to lunar orbit. We can continue communications from there without the immediate threat of further attacks." Captain Zorval hesitated, his scales shifting between the orange of anger and the yellow of caution. Another impact rocked the ship. "Shield integrity at 57%, reported the defense officer. "They're targeting our propulsion systems now." "How could they identify?" Zorval began, then shook his head. "Never mind. Withdraw to lunar orbit, maximum sublight speed. Maintain shields at full power." The Eternal Vigilance accelerated away from Earth, leaving New York's skyline behind as it climbed rapidly through the atmosphere. Multiple explosions blossomed against its shields as the humans continued their assault, tracking the massive vessel with ground-based and orbital weapons systems. "They're following us," reported the sensor officer. disbelief evident in his voice. Primitive spacecraft are accelerating from Earth orbit. Military vessels armed with kinetic weapons and what appear to be nuclear devices. They can't possibly catch us, Captain Zorval said dismissively. No, Vexral agreed, but the fact that they're trying is significant. Most species would be celebrating our withdrawal, not pursuing. The massive ship settled into orbit around Earth's moon, its self-repair systems already addressing the minor damage sustained during the brief engagement. In the ship's strategic command center, the senior officers gathered to assess the situation. This is unprecedented, Ambassador Threlvor admitted, his scales a troubled purple. No species at their technological level has ever resisted first contact so effectively. They got lucky, Dravkor insisted. Some of their experimental weapons happen to resonate with our shield frequencies. A statistical anomaly. Is it? Vextrol challenged. Or is it evidence of something we've overlooked? He activated the central holographic display, showing detailed scans of Earth. Look at their world. Average surface gravity 9.8 meters per second squared, nearly twice that of our homeworld. Atmospheric pressure 101.3 kilopascals. Temperature ranges from 89.2 to 56.7 degrees Celsius. Extreme conditions, Zilnar acknowledged. And that's just the beginning, Vexchel continued. Their world has 64% water coverage, but humans evolved as land dwellers who later adapted to aquatic environments. They can survive in deserts, Arctic conditions, mountains, and jungles. They've established settlements in environments ranging from 50 to plus 50 degrees Celsius. He manipulated the display, zooming in on human biological data. Their skeletal structure is reinforced with calcium deposits, making it incredibly durable. Their muscle density is remarkable, especially considering the high gravity they evolved in. They can survive radiation levels that would kill most species, and their immune systems are constantly battling thousands of microscopic predators. What are you suggesting, Commander? Captain Zorval asked, his scales now the attentive blue of serious consideration. I'm suggesting that we've made a critical error in our assessment, Vextrol replied. Earth isn't just another life-bearing world. By galactic standards, it's a death world, class 12 on our habitability scale. A stunned silence fell over the room. The habitability scale was used throughout the galaxy to classify planets based on how hostile they were to life. Class 1 worlds were paradise planets, perfect gravity, temperature, and atmospheric conditions. The Ziraxian homeworld was a comfortable Class 4. Anything above Class 8 was considered extremely challenging for life to evolve on. Class 12 was the theoretical maximum, a world so hostile that the evolution of intelligent life should be nearly impossible. That's absurd, Dravkor finally said. If Earth were truly a Class 12 world, humans would never have evolved intelligence. They'd be simple organisms struggling to survive. Unless, Zilnair said slowly, her scales shifting to the thoughtful green of realization. The extreme conditions drove their evolution toward intelligence as a survival mechanism. Precisely, Vextrol nodded. And not just intelligence, adaptability, tenacity, and aggression. Humans don't just survive on their death world, they thrive on it. They seek out challenges. They deliberately expose themselves to danger for recreation. He brought up footage from his years of observation, humans climbing sheer cliff faces without safety equipment, diving into ocean depths, racing vehicles at lethal speeds, deliberately depriving themselves of oxygen to reach mountain summits. Their entertainment involves simulated danger, he continued. Their training for warfare involves pushing their bodies beyond normal limits. They deliberately expose themselves to pain to increase their tolerance. By the first egg, whispered Ambassador Threlvor, his scales now the pale yellow of dawning horror. We've awakened a deathworld species. And worse, Vextrom added grimly, we've threatened them. Deathworlders respond to threats, not with submission, but with overwhelming force. In the days following the retreat to lunar orbit, the Eternal Vigilance maintained its position, observing but not engaging. On Earth, the response to first contact had been dramatic. Global military forces remained on high alert, governments formed unprecedented alliances, and scientific communities worked feverishly to understand the alien technology they had briefly glimpsed. In the ship's xenobiology laboratory, Commander Vextrol and a team of specialists conducted a more thorough analysis of human physiology and psychology. What they discovered only deepened their concern. "Their nervous system is fascinating," reported Chief Xenobiologist Merlinar, manipulating a holographic model of human neural pathways. "They process pain differently than most species. They can actually suppress pain signals through mental discipline alone, and their psychological resilience is equally remarkable," added behavioral analyst Pelvor. "Most species develop severe trauma responses after experiencing life-threatening situations. Humans not only recover, but often deliberately seek out similar experiences afterward. It's called adrenaline addiction," Vextrom explained. "Their bodies produce chemicals during dangerous situations that create a pleasurable sensation. Some humans become addicted to this feeling." "They derive pleasure from fear?" Zilnar asked incredulously. "From overcoming fear," Vextrol clarified. "From facing death and surviving. It's deeply ingrained in their psychology." Captain Zorval, who had been listening silently, finally spoke. "What about their technology? How could they damage our shields with such primitive weapons?" Chief Engineer Krelzon manipulated the display to show analysis of the human weapons. "Their technology is primitive but innovative. They approach problems from unexpected angles. The weapons that affected our shields weren't designed to do so. It was an accidental resonance effect that they quickly identified and exploited. And their rate of technological advancement is unprecedented," added Science Officer Felmar. "We've been monitoring their communications since the encounter. They're already analyzing debris from our energy projection and developing theories about how our technology works." "How is that possible?" Captain Zorval demanded. "They shouldn't be able to comprehend our technology at all." "Because they don't think like we do," Vextrol said. Ziraxians, like most spacefaring species, evolved on worlds where careful conservation of energy and resources was essential for survival. Our technological development followed predictable, efficient paths. He brought up a timeline of human technological development. Humans evolved on a world that constantly tried to kill them. Their technology developed not through efficiency, but through desperate innovation. Look at this. They went from primitive flight to landing on their moon in less than 70 of their years, from discovering nuclear energy to building global communication networks in less than a century. And their warfare technology, Zilnar added, studying the data. "They've developed more weapons in the last century than most species create in a millennium. Because they've been fighting each other constantly," Vextrol explained. "Their history is an endless series of conflicts, each driving new technological developments. And now they know they're not alone." Captain Zorval finished grimly. "And they believe we're hostile." "Precisely," Vextrol nodded. "And based on their historical patterns, they will be preparing for war. Not just preparing, they will be innovating, adapting, developing new weapons specifically designed to combat our technology. But they're still pre-FTL," Draftcore pointed out. "They can't reach our worlds." "Not yet," Vextrol agreed. "But given their rate of advancement, particularly when threatened, I estimate they could develop crude FTL capability within a decade, possibly sooner, now that they've scanned our ship." A heavy silence fell over the room as the implications sank in. "We need to report this to the High Council immediately," Captain Zorval finally said. "This changes everything." The quantum communication chamber aboard the Eternal Vigilance was designed to facilitate real-time communication across interstellar distances, a technology humans hadn't even theorized yet. Inside, Captain Zorval, Commander Vextral, and Ambassador Threlvor stood before the holographic projection of the Ziraxian High Council. 12 of the most powerful individuals in the hegemony. "Your report is disturbing," said High Counselor Drelvox, his scales the deep purple of grave concern. "You claim these humans are deathworlders, Class 12? How evidence supports this classification?" Vextral confirmed. "Their world's gravity, atmospheric composition, temperature variations, and indigenous predators all qualify Earth as an extreme environment. Human physiology and psychology reflect adaptations to these conditions, and they damage one of our most advanced vessels with primitive weapons," added Captain Zorval. "Something no pre-FTL species has ever accomplished." The council members exchanged troubled glances. High Counselor Drelvox leaned forward. "What do you recommend?" Ambassador Threlvor spoke first. "We must reconsider our approach. Standard first contact protocols are clearly inappropriate for a deathworld species. I recommend a diplomatic mission, approaching with full transparency and respect." "Respect?" scoffed Councillor Vrolnak, his scales flashing aggressive orange. "They are primitives who attacked the hegemony vessel. Such defiance cannot go unpunished." "Punitive action," Councillor Vextral interjected. "Punitive action would be catastrophic. Humans respond to threats by becoming more dangerous, not less. Their entire evolutionary history has conditioned them to overcome rather than submit. Commander Vextral has studied them for decades," Captain Zorval added. "His assessment should be given significant weight." High Counselor Drelvox's scales shifted to the thoughtful green of deliberation. "What exactly are you proposing, Commander?" "A complete reassessment of our approach," Vextral replied. "We withdraw from their system entirely. We establish a quarantine zone and monitor from a distance. When they inevitably develop FTL capability, we approach them as equals, not as superiors." "Equals?" Councillor Vrelnak's scales flushed crimson with outrage. "The Ziraxian hegemony has stood for 12,000 years. We do not treat primitives as equals." "These primitives damaged our most advanced diplomatic vessel," Vextral countered, his own scales shifting to the assertive blue of conviction. "Imagine what they could do if truly provoked. Their history suggests they would unite against an external threat, pooling their resources and innovative capacity." He manipulated his datapad, sending information to the Council. "I prepared projections of human technological development based on their historical patterns. Even by conservative estimates, if they focus their efforts on military technology, they could potentially match our capabilities within a century." "Impossible," dismissed another counselor. "Is it?" Vextral challenged. "A century ago, they were flying primitive aircraft with fabric wings. Now they have nuclear weapons, global communication networks, and rudimentary AI. Their rate of advancement accelerates when they're threatened." High Counselor Drelvox studied the projections, his scales shifting between concerned purple and thoughtful green. "And you believe they would be hostile to us?" "We fired upon their world," Vextral said simply. "In their position, what would we do?" The question hung in the air, unanswered but understood. The Ziraxian hegemony had built its empire through overwhelming force against those who resisted. They all knew what their response would be. "There is another option," suggested Councillor Threlnak, who had remained silent until now. "If these humans are indeed as physically capable as your reports suggest, they could be valuable as soldiers against the Dorlati. Perhaps we should consider a more covert approach to recruitment." "Infiltration?" Captain Zoval asked. "Precisely," Threlnak nodded. "We study them further, identify influential individuals, and gradually introduce them to our technology, guide their development in directions beneficial to the hegemony." Vextral's scales shifted to the pale yellow of warning. "Extremely risky. Humans are remarkably perceptive. Their fiction is filled with scenarios of alien infiltration. They're psychologically primed to look for such threats. Nevertheless, High Counselor Drelvox said, it warrants consideration. Captain Zorval, you will withdraw the Eternal Vigilance to the edge of their system but maintain observation. Commander Vextrol, you will prepare a comprehensive assessment of human vulnerabilities and potential approaches for covert influence. And if they detect our continued presence? Vextrol asked. Then you will withdraw completely, Drelvox replied. Under no circumstances are you to engage them militarily again. The risk is too great. As the communication ended, Vextrol turned to Captain Zorval. They don't truly understand what we're dealing with. Perhaps not, Zorval agreed. But they're taking the threat seriously. That's a start. 6 months passed. The Eternal Vigilance maintained its position at the edge of the Sol system, its advanced cloaking technology rendering it invisible to Earth's detection systems. Or so they believed. In the observation center, Commander Vextrol studied the latest data from Earth with growing concern. Their technological development is accelerating even faster than I projected, he told Zilnar, who had become his most trusted assistant. How is that possible? She asked, her scales the curious purple of scientific interest. They shouldn't be able to reverse engineer our technology from the limited exposure they had. They're not reverse engineering, Vextrol explained. They're innovating. Look at this. He brought up images of new human spacecraft under construction in orbit. These vessels incorporate principles they observed from our ship, but the implementation is entirely their own. Different, but potentially just as effective. And their weapons development? Vextrol's scales shifted to the concerned yellow. Troubling. They've developed new shield penetration technologies based on the resonance effect they discovered during our encounter. They're preparing for another confrontation. Do they know we're still here? Zilnar asked. Before Vextrol could answer, the sensor officer's voice came over the communication system. Commander, Captain Zorval requests your presence on the bridge immediately. When they arrived, the bridge was in a state of controlled chaos. Officers moved quickly between stations, their scales shifting between alarm red and confusion blue. Report? Vextrol requested as he approached Captain Zorval. We've been compromised, Zorval said grimly. Human communication satellites have been repositioning over the past week. We thought nothing of it until now. He gestured to the main display, which showed a network of satellites forming a detection grid precisely around the Eternal Vigilance's position. They can't possibly detect us through our cloaking field, Zilnar said. They shouldn't be able to, agreed the sensor officer. But they're not using conventional detection methods. They've created a gravity wave detection network. They're mapping distortions in space-time caused by our mass. Ingenious, Vextrol murmured, unable to hide a note of admiration. They couldn't see us, so they looked for what they could detect. Our gravitational footprint. That's not all, Captain Zorval added. We've detected launches from Earth, 3 vessels on an intercept course. The main screen shifted to show 3 human spacecraft, sleek, aggressive designs unlike anything they had built before. Each was armed with weapon systems clearly inspired by Ziraxian technology, though implemented in uniquely human ways. Time to intercept, Vextrol asked. Approximately 4 hours at their current acceleration, reported the navigation officer. They're pushing their engines beyond safe parameters. Of course they are, Vextrol said with a grim smile. They're humans. Captain Zorbal's scales shifted between the orange of aggression and the yellow of caution. Your recommendation, Commander? Vextrol studied the approaching human vessels, noting their design and apparent capabilities. We should withdraw, he said finally. The High Council ordered us to avoid military engagement. Agreed, Captain Zorval nodded. But first, I want to understand how they detected us. Our cloaking technology should be beyond their comprehension. Permission to speak freely, Captain, Vextrol asked. Always, Commander. I believe we continue to underestimate them, Vextal said. We keep analyzing humans through the lens of our own evolutionary experience. But deathworlders don't think like we do. He manipulated the display, bringing up historical data from Earth. Look at their history of warfare. When faced with a technologically superior opponent, humans don't try to match them directly. They find unexpected weaknesses, develop asymmetric strategies, like detecting our gravitational footprint instead of trying to penetrate our cloaking field, Zilna realized. Precisely, Vextral nodded. They couldn't see us, so they looked for what we couldn't hide. Captain Zoval considered this. Prepare for immediate withdrawal. Plot a course that will take us out of their detection range before initiating FTL. As the bridge crew carried out their orders, Vextral continued to study the approaching human vessels. They're transmitting something, he noted. A message, directed at our position. Let's hear it, Captain Zoval ordered. The communication officer activated the receiver, and a human voice filled the bridge. Calm, measured, but with an unmistakable undertone of steel. Ziraxian vessel, this is Captain Elena Rodriguez of the Earth Defense Force. We know you're there. We've been tracking your gravitational signature for the past 3 months. Your cloaking technology is impressive, but it doesn't hide everything. The bridge crew exchanged alarmed glances. 3 months? They had been compromised far longer than they realized. We understand you're observing us, the human captain continued. That's fine. We've been observing you too. Learning, adapting. But know this, we are aware of your presence, and we are prepared for any action you might take. This is not a threat, merely a statement of fact. There was a pause, then, if peaceful contact is your goal, we remain open to dialogue. If not, well, you've seen what we can do with primitive technology. Imagine what we can do now. The message ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. They're bluffing, the tactical officer said finally. They can't possibly have developed weapons capable of threatening us in just 6 months. Are you willing to bet your life on that assessment? Vextral asked quietly. 'Cause I'm not. Captain Zorbal's scales shifted to the deep blue of decision. Neither am I. Complete withdrawal as planned. We'll report this development to the High Council. As the massive ship began to move, accelerating away from the approaching human vessels, Vextral couldn't help but feel a mixture of dread and fascination. In all his years studying alien species, he had never encountered anything like humans. Creatures evolved in conditions so harsh they should never have developed intelligence. Yet here they were, adapting to interstellar threats with remarkable speed. They're not pursuing, reported the sensor officer, as the Eternal Vigilance increased its distance from Earth. They're maintaining position at the edge of their detection grid. They've made their point, Vextral said. They wanted us to know that they know, that's all. As the ship prepared to jump to FTL, Captain Zorbal approached Vextral. What do you think they'll do now? Prepare, Vextral replied simply. They've encountered an advanced alien species that they perceive as potentially hostile. Based on their history, they'll unite, innovate, and build defenses. And they'll do it faster than we can possibly imagine. And if we return peacefully, offer genuine diplomatic relations? Vextral considered this. Possible, but difficult. We've already made a critical first impression. To humans, actions speak louder than words, another concept I learned from studying them. We would need to demonstrate peaceful intentions through actions, not just declarations. The ship's engines hummed as they prepared for FTL jump. Captain Zorval's scales shifted to a troubled purple. I fear we may have awakened something we don't fully understand. We have, Vextral agreed. The question now is whether the hegemony is wise enough to recognize the implications. The Grand Chamber of the Ziraxian High Council was an imposing space. A vast dome supported by living crystal pillars, its ceiling a perfect recreation of the night sky as seen from the Ziraxian homeworld. The 12 High Counselors sat in a semicircle on elevated platforms, their scales shifting through various hues as they processed the information presented to them. Commander Vextral stood before them, having just completed his comprehensive report on the human situation. Captain Zorval stood beside him, adding his own observations when requested. "So," High Counselor Drelbach summarized, his scales the thoughtful green of deliberation. "These humans not only detected our observation vessel through supposedly impenetrable cloaking technology, but have also begun adapting our technology for their own use, all within 6 standard months." "Correct, High Counselor," Vextral confirmed. "Their rate of technological advancement has accelerated beyond even my most aggressive projections." "And you believe they could develop functional FTL capability within a decade?" asked Counselor Thrillamach. "Possibly sooner," Vextral replied. "They've already begun experimenting with space-time manipulation based on observations of our ship's quantum wake. Their theoretical understanding is advancing rapidly." Counselor Vrelnak's scales flushed the aggressive orange that had become his signature during these discussions. "Then we must act now while we still hold the advantage. A preemptive strike to eliminate their capacity for space travel would set them back centuries." "Respect, Counselor," Captain Zorval interjected. "Such action would be catastrophic. If we fail to completely eliminate their capabilities, which is likely given their distributed infrastructure and remarkable resilience, we would only confirm their perception of us as hostile. Their response would be extreme." "You speak as if these primitives could threaten the hegemony," Vrelnak scoffed. "We have dominated this sector for 12,000 years, and in all that time," Vextral said quietly, "we have never encountered a species like humans. Their evolutionary history has shaped them differently than any other known intelligent species. They don't think like we do. They don't respond to threats like we do." He activated a holographic display in the center of the chamber, showing footage from Earth's history, humans fighting against overwhelming odds, surviving in impossible conditions, recovering from devastating setbacks. "This is their pattern," he explained. "When threatened, they don't surrender, they innovate. When outmatched, they don't retreat. They find unexpected strategies. When defeated, they don't submit. They learn, adapt, and return stronger." "You sound as if you admire them, Commander," observed Counselor Krelzen, her scales a curious purple. "I respect them," Vextral corrected, "as one should respect any potentially dangerous species. Understanding them is essential to determining the correct approach." High Counselor Drelvox leaned forward. "And what approach do you recommend, Commander? You've studied them longer than anyone." Vextral took a moment to organize his thoughts. "I recommend a 3-part strategy. First, we maintain distance, no further direct contact until we better understand their development trajectory. Second, we prepare, update our defensive and offensive capabilities based on what we've learned about human innovation. Third, and most importantly, we reconsider our fundamental approach to interspecies relations." "Explain," Drelvox requested. "The hegemony has always approached other species from a position of technological and cultural superiority," Vextral said. "This approach has served us well with species that evolved on worlds similar to our own. But deathworlders like humans require a different approach, one based on mutual respect rather than assumed superiority." "You suggest we treat these primitives as equals?" Vrelnak demanded, his scales now the deep red of outrage. "I suggest we recognize that primitive is a relative term," Vextral replied calmly. "Humans may be pre-FTL, but they've accomplished more in their brief civilization than many species achieve in 10 times that duration. Their potential is significant." A thoughtful silence fell over the chamber as the counselors considered his words. Finally, High Counselor Drelvox spoke. Your assessment is troubling, Commander, but compelling. The evidence you've presented suggests that conventional approaches would indeed be counterproductive with this species. His scales shifted to the authoritative crimson of command. I propose the following. We establish a quarantine zone around the human system. No hegemony vessels will approach within detection range. We will monitor their development from a safe distance and reassess when they achieve FTL capability. And if they develop FTL sooner than anticipated? Asked Counselor Threlomag. Then we adapt, Trailbox replied simply, as they would. The vote was taken. 8 counselors in favor, 4 opposed. The quarantine would be established. As Vextrol and Captain Zorval left the Grand Chamber, the captain's scales shifted to the curious purple of speculation. Do you think it will work, this quarantine? It buys us time, Vextrol replied. Time to prepare, time to learn, but ultimately, contact is inevitable. Humans are too curious, too driven to explore. Once they develop FTL capability, they will expand into the galaxy. And when that happens, Vextral's scale shifted to a complex pattern, part concerned yellow, part hopeful blue. That depends on us as much as them. If we approach them as potential allies rather than subjects or threats, peaceful coexistence is possible. If not, he left the thought unfinished. You truly believe they could challenge the hegemony? Zorval asked, his tone suggesting he still found the idea difficult to accept. I believe, Vextral said carefully, that underestimating humans would be the greatest mistake the hegemony has made in 12,000 years. They are deathworlders. They evolved on a planet that tried to kill them in countless ways, and they not only survived but thrived. They turned their harsh world into a cradle of civilization and art and science. He paused, looking out through a viewport at the stars beyond. And now they know they're not alone in the universe. They know there are advanced civilizations with technologies they don't yet possess. Based on everything I've observed about human nature, they will be relentless in their pursuit of those technologies. For peaceful purposes or military ones? Zorval asked. Both, Vexel replied. Humans compartmentalize less than we do. Their greatest scientific advancements often come from military research, and their military often benefits from civilian innovation. It's all connected for them. As they walked through the crystalline corridors of the hegemony's central complex, Vextrol added one final thought. The quarantine buys us time, Captain. We should use it wisely. 10 years passed, a mere moment in Ziraxian terms, but a significant period for humans. True to the High Council's decision, the hegemony maintained its distance, observing Earth only through long-range sensors and occasional stealth probes that never ventured close enough to be detected. Commander Vextrol, now promoted to Admiral for his expertise on human affairs, stood in the Strategic Monitoring Center on the Ziraxian homeworld. The vast chamber was dedicated to tracking potential threats to the hegemony, with Earth now commanding its own dedicated section. The progress continues to exceed projections, reported Science Officer Thelmar, who had become Vextrol's chief analyst on human technology. They've established self-sustaining colonies on their moon and a 4th planet of their system. Their space infrastructure has expanded exponentially. And their military capabilities? Asked Zilnar, now a commander in her own right. Thelmar's scales shifted to the concerned yellow. Advancing rapidly, they've developed energy weapons based on principles observed during our encounter. Their defensive systems now include rudimentary shield technology, and their spacecraft. He brought up images of the latest human vessels, sleek, powerful designs that bore little resemblance to their earlier primitive craft. They're preparing for another encounter, Vextrol observed. Not just with us, but with any potential threat. Admiral, interrupted a sensor technician, we're detecting unusual energy signatures from the Sol system. Vextrol moved quickly to the main display. Show me. The holographic projection zoomed in on Earth's solar system, focusing on an area just beyond the orbit of their outermost planet. A swirling distortion was forming in space, a pattern Vextrol recognized immediately. "They've done it," he said, his scales shifting to the pale blue of amazement. "They've developed FTL capability." The assembled officers watched in stunned silence as a human vessel emerged from the distortion, a ship unlike any they had seen before. It was smaller than their massive cruisers, but its design suggested efficiency and purpose rather than limitation. "Analysis?" Vextrol requested. "The vessel appears to be using a form of space-time folding for FTL travel," reported Thelmar. "Not identical to our quantum drive technology, but functionally similar. They've taken a different approach to the same problem." "Of course they have," Vextrol murmured. "They always do." "The ship is holding position at the edge of their system," reported the sensor officer. "It appears to be conducting tests." "Their first FTL-capable vessel," Zilnar observed. "A historic moment for their species, and a critical juncture for the hegemony," Vextrol added. "The quarantine protocol is clear. Once a species achieves FTL capability, we must reassess our approach." He turned to his staff. "Prepare a comprehensive report for the High Council. Include all data on human technological development over the past decade, with particular emphasis on their military capabilities and expansion patterns." As his officers carried out their tasks, Vextrol remained at the main display, watching the human vessel as it conducted its tests at the edge of their solar system. After a few hours, it activated its drive again, disappearing into another space-time distortion. "They're returning to Earth," reported the sensor officer. "No," Vextrol corrected, studying the data. "The distortion pattern is different. They're not going back. They're going further. Their first interstellar journey," Zulner realized. "Where do you think they're headed?" Vextrol's scales shifted to a complex pattern, part concerned, part intrigued. "If I were them, I'd be looking for the species that visited my world a decade ago." The Grand Chamber of the Ziraxian High Council was in session, the atmosphere tense as Admiral Vextrol presented his latest report on human activities. "They've established outposts in 7 star systems beyond their own," he explained, indicating the systems on a galactic map. "Their FTL technology has advanced rapidly. They can now travel distances that took us centuries to achieve." "How is this possible?" demanded Councillor Vrelnak, his scales the deep orange of agitation. "They only achieved FTL capability 3 years ago." "As I've explained repeatedly, Councillor," Vextrol replied with practiced patience, "humans innovate at an unprecedented rate, especially when motivated by perceived threats. Our brief encounter with them provided that motivation." High Councillor Drelvox, his scales the thoughtful green of deliberation, leaned forward. "And their expansion pattern? What does it tell us about their intentions?" Vextrol manipulated the display, highlighting the human expansion routes. "They're being methodical. Each system they've colonized offers strategic resources or defensive positions. They're establishing a buffer zone around their home system." "A defensive posture, then?" asked Councillor Krellin. "Primarily, yes," Vextrol agreed. "But they're also exploring. Their vassals have been detected at the edges of several neighboring sectors, including systems near hegemony space." "They're probing our borders," Velnak said accusingly. "They're mapping the galaxy," Vextrol corrected, "learning what's out there. It's consistent with their historical patterns of exploration." Before the discussion could continue, a communication officer burst into the chamber, a breach of protocol that immediately silenced all conversation. "Forgive the interruption, High Councillors," the officer said, his scales the alarming red of urgent news. "We've detected a human vessel at the edge of the Ziraxian home system. It's requesting communication with our leadership." A stunned silence fell over the chamber. The humans had found them, far sooner than anyone had anticipated. "How did they locate our homeworld?" Councillor Threlmak asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. Unknown, the officer replied, but the vessel appears to be a diplomatic ship, not a military one. It's maintaining position outside our defensive perimeter and broadcasting on all frequencies. High Counselor Drelvox turned to Vextrol. Your assessment, Admiral? Vextron's scales shifted through several colors as he considered the implications. This is consistent with human exploration patterns. They've likely been systematically investigating all nearby star systems. Finding us was inevitable. And their intentions? Drelvox pressed. If they wanted conflict, they wouldn't announce their presence, Vextrol replied. They would have gathered intelligence covertly first. This open approach suggests diplomatic intent. Drelvox considered this, then made his decision. Establish communication. I want to hear what they have to say. Minutes later, the holographic projector in the center of the Grand Chamber activated, displaying the interior of the human vessel. A woman stood there, tall by human standards, with dark skin and silver-streaked hair. She wore a formal uniform adorned with symbols of rank and achievement. I am Captain Elena Rodriguez of the Earth Diplomatic Corps, she said, her voice translated perfectly into Ziraxian. On behalf of the United Earth Government, I extend greetings to the Ziraxian Hegemony. Vextrol felt his scales shift involuntarily to the pale blue of shock. It was the same human who had contacted them 10 years ago, when they were observing Earth, then a captain of a small defense vessel, now apparently a diplomatic envoy. High Counselor Drelvox rose to his full height, his scales shifting to the formal crimson of official communication. I am High Counselor Drelvox of the Ziraxian Hegemony. How did you find our homeworld? Captain Rodriguez smiled slightly. The same way you found ours, High Counselor, exploration and observation. We've been mapping nearby star systems since developing FTL capability. And what is the purpose of this contact? Drelvox asked. To establish diplomatic relations, Rodriguez replied. Our first encounter was unfortunate. We believe it's time to start again, on more equal terms. Counselor Vrelna couldn't contain himself. Equal terms? Your civilization is barely a century old. The hegemony has stood for 12,000 years. Rodriguez's expression remained calm, but her eyes hardened slightly. Age isn't everything, Counselor. In the decades since our first encounter, we've established colonies in 7 star systems, developed FTL technology that rivals your own, and formed alliances with 2 other spacefaring species. This revelation sent a ripple of surprise through the chamber. The humans had contacted other species and formed alliances? Which species? Vextrol asked, stepping forward. The Altari Collective and the Novan Republic, Rodriguez replied. Both were quite interested in establishing relations with a species capable of damaging a hegemony vessel with primitive technology. The implied threat wasn't lost on anyone in the chamber. The Altari and Novans were minor powers, but together with humans, they could potentially pose a significant challenge. High Counselor Drelvox's scales shifted to the cautious yellow. What exactly are you proposing, Captain Rodriguez? A formal diplomatic exchange, she replied. We send representatives to your world, you send representatives to Earth. We establish communication protocols, trade agreements, and non-aggression pacts. Standard interstellar relations. And if we decline? Drelvox asked. Rodriguez's expression remained neutral. Then we continue our exploration and expansion elsewhere. But I think both our civilizations would benefit from cooperation rather than isolation or conflict. Drelvox turned to confer quietly with the other counselors. After a brief discussion, he faced the human again. We will consider your proposal, maintain your position, and we will contact you with our response. Of course, Rodriguez nodded. We'll await your decision. The holographic projection faded. They're bluffing, Relnock said immediately. They can't possibly have developed technology that rivals ours in just a decade. Can't they? Vextrol challenged. They damaged our ship with primitive weapons 10 years ago. Imagine what they can do now. And these alliances, added Councillor Krelzen. The Altari and Novans have long resented hegemony dominance in this sector. If they've joined with humans, we need more information, Drelvox decided. Admiral Vextrel, you will meet with this Captain Rodriguez. Assess their true capabilities and intentions. Vextrel's scales shifted to the formal blue of acceptance. As you command, High Counselor. The meeting took place aboard a neutral station at the edge of the Ziraxian system, a small trading post that served as a buffer between hegemony space and the territories of minor powers. Admiral Vextrel arrived with a small delegation, including Commander Zilnor and Science Officer Thelmar. Captain Rodriguez was waiting for them, accompanied by 2 other humans. A tall, pale-skinned male with silver hair and a shorter female with features suggesting East Asian ancestry. All 3 wore the same formal uniforms, though with different insignia. Admiral Vextrel, Rodriguez greeted him with a slight bow. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. Captain Rodriguez, Vextrel replied, his scales the formal blue of diplomatic engagement. I must admit, I'm surprised to see you again. You've advanced in your career since our last encounter. Rodriguez smiled. As have you, Admiral. I was a Defense Force captain then. Now I serve in our diplomatic corps. This is Dr. Marcus Chen, our chief xenobiologist, and Commander James Harrison, our military liaison. Vextrel introduced his own team, and they moved to a conference room designed for interspecies meetings. The furniture was adjustable to accommodate different physiologies, and the environmental controls maintained conditions comfortable for both species. Before we begin formal discussions, Vextrel said once they were seated, I must ask, how did you really find our homeworld? The chances of stumbling upon it through random exploration are astronomically small. Rodriguez exchanged glances with her colleagues, then nodded. You're right, of course. We tracked quantum communication signatures from your observation vessels. Your cloaking technology is impressive, but your communications leave traces we've learned to detect. Vextrel's scales shifted briefly to the surprise blue before he regained his composure. Impressive. And these alliances you mentioned. Genuine, Commander Harrison confirmed. The Altari were particularly eager to establish relations after we shared our defensive technology with them. The Novans were more cautious, but eventually saw the benefits of cooperation. You shared technology with other species? Thelmar asked, his scales the curious purple of scientific interest. Selectively, Dr. Chen explained. We believe in mutual advancement through cooperation. Isolation breeds stagnation. Vextrel studied the humans carefully. They were remarkably composed, showing none of the nervousness one might expect from representatives of a young species meeting with a galactic power. Their confidence was either a masterful bluff or genuinely earned. Let's be direct, Vextrel suggested. 10 years ago, our civilizations met under unfortunate circumstances. The hegemony approached Earth with certain expectations that proved incorrect. Your species responded defensively, as was your right. Now, you seek diplomatic relations. Why? Because isolation isn't sustainable. Rodriguez replied simply. Humanity has always thrived through connection and exchange. We're explorers by nature. We want to understand the galaxy and our place in it. And your rapid military buildup? Vextrel challenged. The defensive perimeter you've established around your home system? These suggest preparation for conflict, not peaceful exchange. Rodriguez didn't flinch. Would you have done any differently in our position? An advanced alien civilization appears over one of our major cities, demonstrates overwhelming firepower, then retreats when we show resistance. Of course, we prepared for potential threats. But, she continued, leaning forward slightly, preparation doesn't equal intention. We don't want war, Admiral. We never did. We want security, knowledge, and peaceful coexistence. Bold words, Commander Zillner observed, from a species that damaged a hegemony vessel within minutes of first contact. "We were defending our home," Commander Harrison replied, his tone level but firm, "just as you would defend yours." A moment of tense silence followed, then Vextral's scales shifted to a more relaxed blue. "Your honesty is refreshing, Captain. Most species approach the hegemony with either fear or obsequiousness. We're not most species," Rodriguez said with a slight smile. "No," Vextron agreed. "Your deathworlders." The humans exchanged glances again, this time with evident surprise. "You know that term?" Dr. Chen asked. "We've studied your world extensively," Vextral explained. "Earth's gravity, atmospheric composition, temperature variations, indigenous predators, and natural disasters all classify it as an extreme environment, what galactic xenobiologists call a death world. Species that evolve in such conditions develop unique characteristics, such as," Rodriguez prompted, "physical resilience, psychological adaptability, aggressive problem-solving, rapid innovation under pressure." Vextral's scales shifted to the thoughtful green. "Traits that make you both potentially valuable allies and formidable adversaries." "And which do you see us as, Admiral?" Rodriguez asked directly. Vextral considered his answer carefully. "That depends on the path we choose from this point forward. The hegemony has traditionally approached other species from a position of superiority. Your species has demonstrated that such an approach would be unwise. Then perhaps it's time for a new approach," Rodriguez suggested, "one based on mutual respect and recognition of each other's strengths." "Perhaps," Vextral agreed. "But the hegemony does not change course easily. 12,000 years of tradition creates significant inertia. Earth's history is filled with empires that refuse to adapt," Commander Harrison noted. "None of them exist today." The implied warning hung in the air, but Vextral didn't take offense. Instead, his scales shifted to an approving blue. "A valid observation, Commander, and one I have made to my own leadership." He turned back to Rodriguez. "I will convey your proposal to the High Council. I cannot promise they will accept it, but I will advocate for serious consideration." "That's all we ask," Rodriguez replied. "A chance to build something better than conflict." As the meeting concluded and the delegations prepared to depart, Vexel found himself reflecting on the remarkable journey that had brought them to this point. 10 years ago, he had warned the hegemony about underestimating humans. Now, they sat across from each other as potential diplomatic partners. "Captain Rodriguez," he said as they reached the docking bay, "may I ask you a personal question?" "Of course, Admiral." "When you contacted our observation vessel 10 years ago, did you truly believe you could defeat us if conflict escalated?" Rodriguez smiled, not the diplomatic smile she had worn throughout their meeting, but something more genuine. "Honestly, we had no idea. But that's the thing about humans, Admiral. We don't need to know we can win. We just need to believe it's possible." Vextron's scales shifted to the understanding blue. A remarkable perspective. "And now? Do you believe peaceful coexistence is possible?" "I do," she replied without hesitation. "Because the alternative benefits neither of us." As Vextral boarded his shuttle, he found himself hoping she was right. The galaxy was changing, and the hegemony would need to change with it, or risk becoming one of those fallen empires Harrison had mentioned. And that, my friends, is the story of how the mighty Ziraxian Hegemony came to fear and eventually respect the deathworlders of Earth. It's a classic example of the humans are Space Orcs trope that we love so much in sci-fi, but with layers that reflect the complexity of first contact scenarios. What makes this concept so compelling is how it completely inverts our usual perspective. In most science fiction, humans are portrayed as the underdogs, physically weaker, technologically inferior, and often more emotionally vulnerable than alien species. But the Deathworlder concept recognizes that our very evolution on this challenging planet has given us advantages that more advanced species might lack. Think about it. Earth is an incredibly hostile environment by cosmic standards. Our gravity is crushing compared to many potentially habitable worlds. Our atmosphere contains corrosive oxygen. Our planet experiences extreme temperature variations, devastating weather events, and constant tectonic activity. We've evolved alongside thousands of predatory species and microscopic organisms that can kill us. And yet, we don't just survive here. We thrive. We've adapted not just physically, but psychologically. We've developed a unique capacity for innovation under pressure, for finding unconventional solutions to seemingly insurmountable problems. Consider what must seem bizarre to an alien observer. We deliberately expose ourselves to radiation to change our skin color. We jump from perfectly functional aircraft for recreation. We climb mountains because they're there. We consume substances that are literally toxic to our bodies for pleasure. We deliberately subject ourselves to physical pain to build strength. From an evolutionary perspective, these behaviors make perfect sense. They're extensions of the adaptability that allowed us to survive on a death world. But to species that evolved in more forgiving environments, we must seem absolutely insane. And that's what makes humans as deathworlders such a fascinating concept. We're not just physically tough, we're psychologically wired to overcome challenges, to push boundaries, to never give up even when logic says we should. We're the species that looks at impossible odds and says, "Watch me." In our story, the Ziraxians made the classic mistake of assuming technological superiority equated to overall superiority. They failed to recognize that humans, shaped by Earth's harsh conditions, would respond to threats not with submission, but with unprecedented innovation and determination. This raises an interesting question about first contact scenarios. How would advanced alien civilizations actually perceive us? Would they recognize the unique advantages our harsh evolutionary history has given us? Or would they, like the Ziraxians, underestimate us based on our technological development alone? Now, I want to hear from you. If you were an alien encountering humans for the first time, what aspect of human behavior would terrify you the most? Is it our physical resilience, our capacity for violence, our ability to form social bonds with completely different species? We keep predators as pets, after all. Or perhaps something more subtle, like our ability to adapt to almost any environment? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and I'll be responding to the most interesting takes. I'm particularly interested in hearing what normal human behaviors you think would seem most bizarre or frightening to an alien observer. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the humans as deathworlders concept, please obliterate that like button. It really helps with the algorithm. And if you're new here, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload. I post new content every week, exploring the most fascinating concepts in science fiction and theoretical xenobiology. Thanks for watching, and remember, to the rest of the galaxy, we are the Deathworlders. Until next time.